we kind of have a problem in the church, I think, as well. If I can just continue with this, that we, dare I say it, sometimes we've been a wee bit Americanized. We say, well, show me how to do it. I did a conference in the United States for missionary organization, and I was asked to go in and do a seminar. And I went in, there was 100+ people in the room, and 4 staff came to me and said, where's your computer stuff? I said, I don't have any. Where's your music? I don't have any. Where's your video clips? I don't have any. What have you got? And this, how spiritual was this? I've just got my Bible. I said, I'm doing a seminar. Now, I didn't realize that seminars in most places and conferences normally mean you're not the main speaker, but you're still giving a talk. To me, a seminar is when people interact. So that's what I'd prepared to come and do. And what I did was, I got them to split into groups of 10, and I asked them to imagine, they were meant to be European missionaries, to going to Amsterdam and doing a 2-week mission in Amsterdam. Could they tell me what they were going to do? And I said, please remember, I'll be devil's advocate with this. So the first group came, I gave them 15 minutes. And the first group, I said, right, go. And they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Amsterdam, we're going to open a coffee shop. And I started laughing because I said, I couldn't believe it was such a good answer to start with. I said, to illustrate my point, I said, you do realize what you've just said. The last thing that you're going to get in a coffee shop in Amsterdam is coffee. A coffee shop in Amsterdam is for marijuana. And I said, you've just said you're going to go and sell drugs for Jesus in Amsterdam, which is, it's an interesting way of doing it, and it may work. But anyway, we carried on like that for 45 minutes. Just they suggested things, and I went back and forth. Anyway, afterwards, this lady came up to me, and she said to me, I need to talk to you. I said, that's fine. I said, we'll go to the next main session, and then we'll have a coffee afterwards. No, now. So she was one of these very forceful American ladies who's into submission you have to submit to. And I said, okay, I'm going. I'll come with you. Come on, let's go talk about it. So we did, and I said, you're obviously upset. And she said, yes, I am upset. And I said, well, I apologize, whatever it was. And she said, look, you've got to understand, I'm American. I said, yeah, okay, I've got that far. She said, in our culture, we're taught that you can do anything. I don't know if you've seen Obama this week saying, Americans can do anything. She said, we're taught that we can do anything. I mean, people applaud that rubbish. And you think, please. But anyway, she said, we're taught we can do anything. She said, I understand what you did. She said, I understand. You know, you trashed our suggestions and so on. And I said, well, look, the devil will do a whole lot worse than me. And she said, yeah, but my problem, the reason I'm really upset is I sat there waiting for you to give the answer. And you didn't. And I said, that's why you're upset? She said, yes. And then the thought has just struck me. And she said, it's horrifying. You didn't give the answer because you don't know the answer. And I said, yeah, you're right. I wouldn't have a clue. You know? I don't know the answer. And I said, you cannot go as a missionary to Europe. And personally, I don't think you can go a missionary anywhere, going in thinking you've got the answer about how to do things. So I think we've got that mentality. Show me something that I can do that will make an instant difference to my church. And I actually think the thing that will make the biggest difference is you get a better understanding of God, you get a better understanding of His Word, you get a better understanding of the situation. To me, almost everything then flows from that. Having said that, we're now going to go on to look at some of the things that we can do. And I want to give you, if I can give you that, and then if you can just pass those along. This is a leaflet, or a wee booklet about Solas. I'll explain it in a moment, and also I'll give you that leaflet. I think there's enough for each, and you can keep them and give to others. Solas means just the word, it's a Gaelic word that means light. Because of the New Atheism, because of the Da Vinci Code, because of the Dawkins letters, I'm not going to go into all of that. A man called Gordon Wilson, who used to be the leader of the Scottish Nationalist Party, came in to our church and came in to visit, and he's still with us, he and his wife, and they're wonderful. And he asked to see me one day, and he said, David, I think the message that you have got is absolutely fantastic. And he said, I want to tell you, this is a very interesting insight, actually. He said, in the Scottish National Parties in the 1950s, we planned for a Scottish government 100 years from now. One thing I can observe about the church, you don't plan long term. That's true. I don't think we do. The second thing he said was this. You've got a fantastic message. He said, we've got a Scottish government, that's brilliant, but your message is more important, but you're rubbish at getting it out. And he said, I don't mean you personally. He said, I mean the church. He said, how come we haven't heard this? And that is the one that really, really bothered me. And then he said, and you have to stop running around like a headless chicken. You need to let the mountain come to Mohammed. And I said, Gordon, I know you're newish to the church and Christianity or whatever. That's not great theology, you know. But he said, I said, I know what you mean. And he said, look, and this by the way, is my view, that we do not need in Britain a Ravi Zacharias or a Billy Graham. We need 10,000 of them at least. And in our churches as well, we need just instinctively people who are going to bring other people. We need to train our people to be evangelists. So he suggested, why don't we set up something that will have several aims. One will be to get into the secular media. The other will be to train Christians and encourage Christians to do the evangelism, and mainly, often by example. And the third will be to provide resources. Now, I will come back to that last question, where can I find Jesus, later on. So we set it up and we got going, and one of the things that's important to understand, this was not set up as David Robertson Ministries. I stayed as pastor of my church. My elders agreed that I could do 2 days a week with this, 4 days a week in the church. And the Lord blessed us as a church as well, I think, because of that. God has really encouraged us and blessed us in different ways. We've moved out of our church because we got offered a building. I think it was a Barclays building in an industrial estate that was 50,000 square feet, and Barclays couldn't sell it. They closed down. They couldn't sell it, so they avoid business rates. They gave it to a charity that does this kind of things, who offered it to other charities. And we went in and applied, and we got, I think, about 5,000 square feet. So out of that, we built a recording studio, and we've got offices, and we've got training and so on. God sent us a brilliant guy who helps us do videos. We've got a couple of guys who work with us. We've got an American missionary who's tremendous, who is our kind of European director. And we're just this wee organization trying to encourage Christians to get involved. And these were the areas that we put up. Now, this is just typical of me. This is my fault. Are we doing all this? No, I just thought, right, I'd like this, and this. There's actually another couple I would add on there as well, Islam and one or two others. But I thought, we're trying to engage the whole lot. And the thing that we're saying is it's church-based, persuasive evangelism. We don't call it apologetics, because that carries all the wrong idea. But it's church-based, local church-based, persuasive evangelism. I do think that obviously interdenominational organizations do a tremendous amount of good. But I would also suggest that in my ministry, I've noted that as the number of Christians has declined in the country, the number of organizations has increased. And it seems everyone has a ministry and everyone does this. And I think a lot of people are not prepared to invest in the church, and so therefore invest in other things. And a kind of mixed, weird ecclesiology, frustration with their local situation, a little bit of personal empire building, lots of different things, all come in. And it's meant we've got a very, very, very confused situation, and a very weak and divided situation in the church in Britain. And I do think one of the things that the Lord is doing is shaking us up and saying, sorry, you've got to get together. That's why gospel partnerships are such great things. I also think that we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. One of the sad things I've noticed is how much Christian organizations compete with one another. It's like when I went to Dundee, there was a number of evangelical churches, not that many, but there was a number. And the obvious way to grow your church was to attract evangelicals who moved into the city, people who are already Christians. It's the easiest way to grow your church. Well, how do you do that? You do that by competing with other churches. And that's deeply within, and to me again, I've seen that in the States. I remember in Memphis, I went down one street, and the minister with me, he said, it was like every second building was a massive church building. And he says, yeah, it is a kind of church lane. And I said, well, what about that one? He said, oh, that's the Anglican. I said, well, they must have thousands of people in that congregation. He said, no, they've got 300. I said, well, look at the size of the building. He says, yeah, it's got a basketball court, it's got a school, and are all the churches like that? And he said, yeah, basically. I said, why? He said, because if we didn't provide a basketball court and different things, then our families would just go off to other churches. So what's happened is churches, instead of evangelizing and reaching out amongst non-believers, are competing for a declining pool of Christians. And I've seen, even in the Scottish Highlands, when I went to Brora, the elders there said to me, oh, David, All we need is just a couple of evangelical families to move into the area. And it's not going to happen, guys. That's not how it works. What we need is 10 people per year, at least, becoming believers. And they're going, that's not going to happen. I say, okay, let's see. In the Lord's providence, that is what happened. But I do think we've got to think about what we're doing and how we reach out. And it does seem so impossible. But these are some of the suggestions, anyway, that we would go with. Society. Now, I'm using that as a broad thing, engaging with the community, engaging with society. And remember, everything I'm thinking here is about evangelism. Road to Recovery there is a tremendous kind of Alcoholics Anonymous with a much more Christian emphasis. Things like family support, dealing with issues like politics, Christians in politics. I wonder how many of your churches obey the injunction to pray first of all for kings and those in authority. It's an interesting one. Do your people know who your MPs are or your councillors? Do you pray for them? Because then I think that's important. I mean, they should be up on the wall with your missionaries because you're told to pray for them. It's interesting, just a long, long time it's taken, but I've got more and more contact with local politicians, and I just simply say to them, we do pray for you. And we've tried to encourage political involvement. Now, the danger there is, of course, you try and identify Christianity with one particular part of politics. I had a friend who came to work with us, and he said, I was a junkie in the United States. I was a heroin addict. I was a Democrat. I was this, that, and the other thing. I was converted. I became a Republican. Okay, how does that work? And there is an equation of sometimes, they used to say the Anglican Church was the Tory party at prayer. Well, it's certainly not that anymore, at least not amongst its bishops. But you get people, conservative evangelical means conservative politically, or you might say, well, if you're going to be a real Christian, you've got to be socialist. I think that's just daft. I'm happy, I want to see Christians involved in all political parties. We've even got a guy in Solent who's involved with UKIP in Scotland, which to me is the definition of insanity, but never mind. We encourage him. Yeah, that's the way you want to roll, go with it. And I do think getting people to think about the community and the society around is really, really quite important. In fact, it's very important. Regularly praying for what's going on. If we only are known as a church that we complain when a sex shop opens up in the same street as us, there's something wrong. So that constructive engagement with politicians, it's like somebody at the BBC told me that, most letters, of course, written in are letters of complaint. But I've done some stuff on the BBC, and some people actually wrote in and said thank you. That actually made a big impact on their producers. And I think we need to learn to commend as well as critique those who are in authority and pray. And particularly if you find there are Christians on your local council or whatever, do your best to encourage them. I was in Brighton, and there was a woman came to a meeting, and she said, David, I'm really, really interested in politics, and I really buy into this, and I want to get involved. And I said, what would you be your political party? And she said, Green. I'm really probably closer to the Greens. So I said, okay, go for it. And she got to know the now MP, Caroline Lucas, and she became a Green councillor, and she got really, really involved. You can actually read her story on the Christian Today website, because she got expelled from the Green Party for opposing same-sex marriage, even though the Greens had an open policy on it. She still got expelled. But I thought, well, good for you. You did it. We kept in touch. You made your case. And please remember, in politics is always compromise. It's not. Sometimes Christians don't understand how it works. But how wonderful for a Christian politician to know that the church is praying for them and not just critiquing. So that kind of thing, the kind of mercy ministries stuff, CAP, we have CAP, which is very, very helpful and useful and so on. But the whole thing, I do want to warn you not to come across as the church that's incredibly patronizing. We run a soup kitchen, how wonderful are we? Well, you're not really. Just because you run a soup kitchen, that doesn't make you wonderful. And the other thing I've noticed with some churches is they believe in justification by faith for individuals, but justification by works for churches. So that they say, oh, our church is great because it has a nursery, and our church does this, and our church does that. The reality should be that your church is there to worship and serve Jesus Christ. And if as part of that, that's what goes on, that is wonderful. If on the other hand, instead of having a youth group yourself or a youth club within your church, you've got 3 of your people who are involved running youth clubs and stuff in the wider community, so be it. That's wonderful too. And here's another big mistake that we make. Some of us, you probably don't, but I did, so I'll just confess my own. I pray for missionaries, pray for people who are going off on missions and so on. And one guy came up to me and said, David, I run a lot of the local council. He says, how come you've never prayed for us? And I said, you're right. You're right. You know, the lorry driver is a missionary in that sense. You know, and I think, again, it's part to just learning to pray for one another and support one another, the work that we're doing in society. We're there. I love Tertullian's great statement where in his Apologia, he says, when the sun is shining too hot, you blame the Christians. When it's raining, you blame the Christians. You say the Christians to the lion, the Christians to the lion. And he says, what? All of us? We are everywhere. We are in your, we are in your shops. We are everywhere except in your brothels, I think is what he says. We're in your businesses and so on. We are in your palaces. And I kind of love that aspect of Christianity. I remember going to Stornoway one time. Maybe Stornoway was a wee bit different. And Richard Dawkins was going to be there, and I was part of a book festival at which he was at. He was on the same plane. And I got off the plane, and the person at the customs thing said, praying for you, David. I thought, oh, good, that's one. Sorry, Richard. You know, and then I got in, one of the policemen said, go on, David. I was going, thank you, that's another one. Even the woman at the reception of the community art centre said, oh, I was just praying for you. And so I thought, it's great, it's Christians everywhere. And you'd be quite surprised. We think, oh, is there anyone who's not bowed the knee to Baal? Yeah, there's 7,000. Maybe a whole lot more. So get involved in society. Science. I think this is one that we miss out on. The science-faith interaction, the apologia of science, challenging the claims of scientism, Christians in science, and so on. People will say, I believe in science. Say, well, you need to come to my church because half my congregation are scientists or doctors or, you know, doing it involved in science. And I do think there are different ways that this can be done. At the moment, we're doing a project entitled Scientists in Congregations, where we've got different people to come and do a lecture on a Monday night, maybe once every 3 months. And I'm really intrigued at how many people come. It's been good, really, really good so far. We've trying really hard to dispel this myth that faith and science are opposed. We have some books that we would give to people. John Lennox's, for example, has God's Undertaker, has Science Buried Religion. It's a great book, and there are others like that as well. I have to say the worst meeting I've ever had in my church was an organization that came and wanted to speak on science, and at that point we only had 40 people, and we have a big welcome, trust, research, 300 top scientists from all over the world next door. So I thought, yeah, let's go for this. And the guy came and I said, now I know that you're Young Earth, but I don't want you to stand up and do an in-house argument about Young Earth, Old Earth amongst Christians here. I think we'll get quite a lot of non-Christians coming. And he completely ignored what I said. He stood up. There was 100 people, which was tremendous. And it was the worst meeting I've ever been at. He got absolutely massacred by a French atheist scientist who just destroyed him, and he didn't even see it. And I was sitting with my head in my hands in total embarrassment. And afterwards, I spoke to one of my guys who was a biology lecturer. And I said, what did you think about that? And he said, David, it was awful. I said, why? He said, well, I can't talk about chemistry and geology, but in my field, he was 30 years out of date. And he said, people were just laughing at him. And I said, okay. So we actually, it's the only time I've ever done this, I called an emergency congregational meeting the following night. And I got a chemist, a geologist, and 2 biologists who are in my congregation to sit on a panel. And I said, we need to talk about this, and we did. But I will never do that again. I will never, because it was rude, and it was ignorant, and the science was actually quite appalling. And yet there were Christians there who thought, oh, that was really great. And it wasn't really great. So I think we've got to make sure that the science that we do is right. We've got to understand the difference between scientism and all the rest of it. And we've got to understand, and I said this before, that not everything is the creation-evolution debate. In fact, in modern science, it's very foolish to begin with that. You've got to look at much, much bigger and wider issues. Now, I was misunderstood before because I think people said I was thinking it wasn't important. I think it is important, but I don't think it's where you begin with atheists or with non-Christians, because you just end up going round and round and round in circles, and it's not helpful. So I'm thinking here of how we encourage people in our congregations who are involved in science, how we challenge the claims of scientism, and how we counteract the impression that science and Christianity are opposed. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything on that.
I want to recommend Test of Faith, which I assume you know.
Yes.
Produced by the Faraday Institute.
Yes.
And they have a lot of Facebook presence at the moment.
Yeah.
And also some written material which you can use in small group discussions.
Yeah.
It's quite flexible.
It is good stuff. I'll add one slight word of caution. I was involved in that and asked to review it, and it's very strongly theistic evolutionist. It was. I asked them to adapt it a little bit because I said there are Christians who have different views, and again, I just thought they were making the same mistake of pushing one particular. So to be fair to them, they did, and I would recommend it. There's another one, absolutely tremendous, called The God Question. And this is a man who's a real visionary, Ian Morris, who spent over £1 million producing this series, which was television quality, and it's actually been sold all over the world onto secular television. Now, we don't think they're trying to get BBC and Channel 4 to take it. I don't think they will. But The God Question is brilliant, and you can get the DVDs of it, because it's like half-hour programs looking at things like the human brain, creation evolution as well, things like that. But it's about as neutral as you can get. But it's a fantastic discussion starter. It's got people like Richard Dawkins and other atheists on it, as well as other scientists who are not atheists. But it's a great discussion starter. And I would highly recommend that as well. So Test of Faith, The God Question, definitely. And there's some others as well.
Neutral in what way?
What's that?
You said it was neutral.
Well, basically, if you showed this to your church, they'd be going, wait a minute, why doesn't it say that God did it? Because it doesn't. It asks all the questions. Now, as a Christian leader, you should be able to, but in that sense, it's very, very fair. It's not, you could never watch it and go, this is religious propaganda. And that's also, by the way, it can be used in schools. Because the key thing for us is to get the question raised, because the extreme naturalistic evolutionists, creationism, that's like pedophilia for them, and they horrified. Absolutely horrified, and say, well, wait a minute, guys, can people even ask questions? No, you're an idiot. And I just say, no, let's let people ask questions. So, yeah.
In a sentence, what do you mean by scientism, please?
Scientism is the belief that all that exists is material things, and everything can be explained from material causes. It's materialism or naturalism. It is, and therefore, it's someone like Peter Atkins who will say, everything can be explained by science. By empirical science, and that only works if everything is material. It's not.
This may seem a slight strange question. Do you expound Genesis from the pulpit?
Yes. In fact, can I highly recommend you go onto our website, the St. Peter's website, and go over to the sermon archive and get Sinclair Ferguson's sermons on Genesis 1 to 3. Again, it's very interesting what he did. He didn't go into all the scientific questions, which was fascinating. He believes, as I do, that Genesis 1 to 3 is the inspired word of God. And yes, I think you have to teach it. And it's, I would argue that Genesis 1 to 3 and Revelation, 21, 22, they bookend the whole Bible. And if you don't get Genesis 1 to 3 right, I doubt you're going to get the rest of the Bible right. But having said that, I still think you're going to get Christians who will disagree about the science of it. But I keep coming back and saying Genesis 1 to 3 is not a science textbook. It's not myth. You know, it's not myth, but it's not a science textbook. And for people to turn it into a science textbook is just, I think that's an abuse of Scripture, you know. So I'm in this position where I believe that the Bible is the Word of God. I believe Genesis 1-3. And yet there are aspects of how life began and stuff I don't know the answer to, but I don't think Genesis 1-3 answers that. And we shouldn't try and make it give answers where it's not doing that. But I think it's a big mistake to say Genesis 1-3 is myth as well.
Just one of the things we found, because we've had creation
Yeah.
things, is most people don't know what Genesis says.
Yeah.
So they're arguing out of ignorance anyway.
Yeah.
So get someone in, disguise it as a lecture, but it's really a Bible study,
Yeah.
to explain Genesis, and that's half your battle.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And again, I think what happens is people oppose this come with this with presuppositions all the time. Like, say, go on, David, are you a creationist? Say if you're a creationist. You know, and it is like saying, admit that you murdered your mother. You know, and I say, I'll sometimes go, yes, I am a creationist, as are the vast majority of people in the world, as is every single Christian and so on, because we believe in a creator. Oh, no, that's not what I mean. Oh, what do you mean? I mean, do you believe that the world is 4,000 years old? No, I don't believe that. Well, you're not a creationist. Okay, that's fine. Except they don't. They use creationists as code for, do you believe in God? And so it's one of those words. It's like intelligent design. People go, I mean, every day I get, this website goes up and people say, David Robertson hasn't answered if he believes in intelligent design yet. And I'm not going to, because I'm not going to leave them a stew. Because if in public, if I've asked it, I'll just simply say, yeah, of course I do. I believe the world was designed. I believed it was designed by an intelligence. So that's what they're talking about is American politics and various other things, and the whole intelligent design movement. And I know something about it, and what I know about it seems quite good, but I don't know enough about it, and I'm not going to get involved in all of that. So to me, you know, maybe it's plain with words, but I go, yeah, I'm a creationist, and yes, I believe in intelligent design. So. Okay, let me just go on to cafe. This is one that it's Acts 17. Where's the marketplace? Where do people meet? You know, I think pubs have kind of stopped being that because pubs are filled with screens of, you know, watching sport or music or whatever. It's actually often quite difficult in a pub to have a conversation. Now, maybe you're much more civilized down here and you can sit outside and sip your warm English beer and you can do that. But pubs also, it's very interesting. No smoke. What a great thing that's been for cafe culture. Because in Dundee in February, you've got people sitting outside drinking beer or doing, you know, cappuccinos and lattes and stuff. Why? Because you're not allowed to smoke inside, so you have to smoke outside. So it's freezing and you're sitting there and you're going, you know. But basically, we've got this whole cafe, there's coffee shops opening everywhere. You know, I mean, I'm getting fed up of paninis and stuff, you know. But that is where people go. And we've done this thing. I don't have any of the books with me. I've been doing coffee shop evangelism for years. And the guys at Solent said, David, you've got to write this down. You've got to write this down. I said, no, I'm too busy doing it. And I will do it. But I never got around to doing it. So one day they came in and they said, come here. And they took me upstairs and they sat me in front of a camera. They said, we're going to ask you some questions. And they asked me the questions about doing coffee shop evangelism. And they transcribed it, edited it, put it into a book. We published it ourselves. And I'm amazed because we've had to reprint it twice. It's just a very simple idea. Even the smallest church can do it. You go to a local coffee shop. For me, one that preferably you use, that you've got to know the owners, and you say, look, I'd like to do an event here. What do you want to do? You know, a quiet night perhaps, because maybe it's a small shop, so we'll take it over. We'd like to have someone come in and speak on the God delusion or something, or sex church in the city, or, you know, God and science, or lots of different themes. And sometimes it's quite good to say we'd like to have someone come and speak about their book, because they understand that, and it's almost like a book signing, which I hate book signings, but I do them because that's what they expect. And you get someone who comes and speaks for 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. People have coffee and so on, and cake and things like that, and then people just ask questions for the next hour. If it's well organized, it's well prepared, it works. I've done it in small villages with a coffee shop that could seat 16 people. It was wonderful. It was absolutely packed. And people just very intimate, people asking questions. I've done it in much, much bigger venues. Remember one church phoned me up, and Church of Scotland guy phoned me up and said, could you come and start our Alpha course for us with a kind of outreach event? I said, yeah. I said, where do you want me to do it? He said, in our church hall. I said, no. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, your church hall, you're just going to get the people in your church. I know that. I know where you are. I know what it's like. You know, it's different if you knew you'd get on. I said, do you know anyone? Have you got any connection at all with a hotel or a coffee shop or something in your town? And he went, oh yeah, one of my elders owns a hotel. I said, right, okay. Ask him, can you do a dinner event or some kind of event, and I'll speak at that, and then launch your course after that. And he did. It was absolutely packed. And loads of people signed up. Yeah.
So if it's filled with Christian people from church, or would it be filled with people in the hotel?
No, that one was basically the Christian people are going to come from the church. The trouble with a lot of evangelistic events is they're almost solely Christian, which is a bit self-defeating. So the key with these kind of things, quite often a church has never done this, and so they do it, and they'll ask me to come, and I'll go and do the first one, and I'll tell them to get other speakers if they can continue them. But you get the minister, you see, and this is what ministers are like. We like to be successful, and especially when someone's visiting, we don't want them to think that we're duff. So we've never done this before. We booked a venue that takes 60 people. So far, we know of 5 who are coming. So they'll phone me up and say, oh, and I'll say, guys, I need you to do me one big favor. Please do not phone around all your friends and get them to come. So it gives the impression of success. You know, there's a church in Bedford who taught me a lot. They were great. It was a New Frontiers church. Because I went for them, and first of all, I was amazed that they were charging people to come. I said, you can't charge people to come and hear the gospel. And they said, no, it's a free cup of coffee. So, well, you charge them. It's not free, but never mind. I said, okay, fair enough. You know your own constituency. I couldn't see it. Are people paying? But actually, they were spot on. Because here was the thing. People had to buy tickets. They knew how many people were coming. And they... people valued it. See, if you say to someone, do this, come to this, it's a free event, they're going to say, okay, well, it's free, but there's no free lunch. They're trying to do something to me. But if they're actually paying for it, they go, okay. So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect of it for them was brilliant. They said to their own church people, you can't buy a ticket unless you buy 2. And one of them has to be for a non-Christian that you're taking with you. And as a result, I think they moved 3 times because it was just absolutely packed. But it meant that half the people coming were not Christians. Sometimes, there are a lot of people who will go. I've done more open events in that, for example, in Leeds, in a big Borders bookstore, I did a kind of event. I think it was the Dawkins Letters, actually, a book signing and stuff. And there's about 50 people came. But the bookstore itself, there were hundreds of people milling around. But my voice was going out over the PA system. So everyone got to hear the gospel. I thought it was fantastic. And of course, people came up and started firing questions a wee bit more aggressive and so on. Actually, that one, an example of the perils of what you do, because this is a horrible image, but for me, doing this kind of thing is like standing up naked. Because people just come with all different angles. And in the Leeds one, I remember this guy stood up and he said, what do you think of presuppositional apologetics? And I thought, you're kidding me. And he'd actually driven an hour to come and ask this question of me, And I just looked at him and thought, this is an outreach event and you're asking me a question that even amongst Christians, maybe only 5% will know what you're actually talking about. And it's not relevant at all to what I was saying. So I just looked at him and I thought, and this is my fault, because it's the way I work, I just looked at him and said, I think it's okay, as long as you don't take it too seriously and keep taking the pills. And you don't say that to somebody who's that serious. And he just got really angry. And I said, well, you're going to have to wait till afterwards. Talk to me at the end. And he did talk to me. And he said, you come all this way from Scotland and it's pointless because unless God is at work. I said, I know that. But what if God sent me? What if he works through me? Well, why did you come? I was really angry with him, actually. I was thinking, I'm here to evangelize, and you're here to go on about a theory of apologetics, which actually I basically buy into. But I just thought, So sometimes you get that. You get all those different kinds of things. But the key, I would recommend the Quench book, and email me and we'll send you a copy of it. I think it's about £3 or £4, but we'll give it you for nothing. That's not the issue. I think almost any church can do it. Sometimes you can do it as we did here on Saturday night in the church, and I think that was okay, Phil, do you think? this is a good venue. You can set it up as a cafe thing. You're still got the problem that people go, I'm going to church. So, that's, if you don't have a facility like this, but you can, most coffee shops, obviously, not Starbucks in, Leicester Square or something, I don't know. Not one that's going to be really busy anyway, but a lot of them are really happy to get the business because what they're looking for is footfall. They're not so concerned about what they sell. They want people into their shop, and that's the one. And if you're bringing 40 or 50 people in on a quiet night, they're very happy. Yeah.
We're part of the Cafe Church Network, which has actually got a national agreement with Costa.
Yeah.
So if you go to your local Costa, they are almost by policy bound to say yes to
Yeah.
your approach.
Yeah, Costa, and also I think Cafe Nero are very, very sympathetic to it. Starbucks less so. But also your independent coffee shops love it. Not always, but you can soon find. And a key part of that is, by the way, relationship. The Sicilian cafe down from our church, we can do anything we want there. That's mainly because their pastor's great and I'm in there at least once a week. and I go, it's my second office. I take people there for coffee and we know the whole thing. And the other thing about doing it in quote-unquote a secular venue is the staff get to hear the gospel as well. Because they got to be there. So, there's lots of advice I would give about that, but I say virtually all of it's in the book, and it's actually worth doing. We do a kind of 2-hour training thing for people to help them. I think almost any church can do this. And sometimes, sometimes it doesn't work. But actually, I think out of, I've done a couple of hundred of these kind of outreach events, because for me, that's my bread and butter. I love it. I just love it. And I think maybe 3 or 4 have been pretty disastrous. But the rest have really helped. Yeah.
When you say anybody could do it, you've been speaking at these.
Yeah.
How about us speaking at these?
There's your problem. And sorry, I don't mean, here's the key thing, quality. So your coffee's got to be quality, your sound system's got to be quality, your welcome's got to be quality, and your speaker has got to be quality. And actually that's quite difficult, because don't assume that because someone's a minister they can do it, because the whole key of this is interaction. And you say, well, I'm kind of used to doing that. No, I'm used to people rubbishing you, getting up and walking out, getting bored and having enough. Some ministers are very, very good at that, but others are not. And I would just look for somebody. You're looking, 1, they're a good communicator. 2, they know what they're talking about on the subject. Almost always have somebody chair it who's used to chairing things, who knows exactly what they're doing. A great chairperson makes a phenomenal difference. So I think you've got to try and build up a database of speakers. We've tried in Scotland, so someone phones up and says, David, could you speak on science and religion? I say I could do it, but there's a limit to my time. But we've got Alistair Donald, chaplain at Harrier Watt. We've got various other people. They could do it. And I think you've got to look round and find your people. And I think the other thing you've got to start doing is start training people, because for me, I think it took me 25 years to train to do this, what I'm doing just now. So I don't expect people to do what I do, but I think you can adapt it so that other people can get involved and do things. The golden thing for a speaker at this level is that they have to be really quick to think on their feet. Really quick.
In what ways, the one you said there's a few that have really failed?
Yeah.
Or been disasters. What sort of things?
Well, there was one in Northern Ireland that just assumed that they thought, well, he's a speaker, he must be famous. So they didn't give any publicity. Well, you don't publicize things, don't expect people to come. That was just daft. There was a couple that had been in churches that people thought it won't work, so they didn't invite their non-Christian friends. I always say, what I'm looking for is, beforehand, I'm wanting people to pray, proper publicity, well-designed things, all that kind of stuff. What else? The congregation to be, or congregations, because quite often I do them as joint things with different churches. The congregations to be involved, where you're saying, right, you are going to invite your non-Christian friends. You're going to pray for them and you're going to take them along. And then the key thing for me as well is follow-up. I want to be able to say at the end, you see, I've removed some of the defeater beliefs, or maybe you've got thinking, well, you see that person, that person, that person, that person. I want you can go to their church and you'll meet Jesus. I need to be able to say that. You also need, when it's done, that people have to sit around tables, and there have to be Christians at each table who are prepared to continue the conversation. My job is agent provocateur in that level. I did one in Harpenden, which is kind of, like there's 6,000 millionaires in Harpenden or something, it's just because bizarre place. And I went to this cafe restaurant, they charged 12 quid a head, and I thought, you guys are insane charging that. But it was completely sold out with over 100 people, and they actually had to put on an extra event on the Sunday afternoon in the Anglican church because there were so many people who wanted to come. The one in the church was free. It was just because it didn't involve, and they kind of had a light meal and things and it was just incredible. But I then go away, or whoever's speaking goes away. It's the conversations that people have with their friends. That for me is, there's different types of this cafe evangelism. There's the almost naked one, where you're standing up in a whole bunch of strangers. And then there's the people bringing their friends. And I find the latter, the former I find more stimulating at one level, because you just boom, 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 like speak in a gay bar or something. That's fun. It's really interesting. And then, but that one it works. I think the second one works a lot better.
Doesn't God expect, on the individual level,
Yeah.
not some
Yeah.
speaker, but on the individual level, going into a Costas or
Yeah.
something like that, do you not think God expects every Christian to be so burning with zeal to share their faith that it's bubbling up inside them and that they just long to share Jesus?
Yes, so much so that you have to be restrained, because if you stand up and say, hey, I need you guys to listen to this, but this is what happens. Here's another way in terms of coffee shop evangelism that I would talk about, which is a little bit more different. When we started doing this, and it was in Acosta's, we did it in Dundee, one or two other churches got the idea and they started doing things, but in particular, there was one group of guys who started holding their Bible study there. And they would just sit around a table, drink coffee, had their Bible. It was lovely to walk in and just see people studying the Bible. And my son, I'm quite a Sabbatarian, so I wouldn't have not gone this route. But on a Sunday morning, he went with two of his friends to a local coffee shop down from the church, had a bacon roll and a coffee, and they met together for prayer there and so on. And I just thought, this is great. All over the place, Christians are meeting in that kind of thing. So I do think, yes, you want to do that. Well, there's one time, I didn't do this. There's a lady started coming to the church, and she wanted to talk about some stuff. So we went to a coffee shop. Except it was a kind of tea house. It was quite, and that moment when you're talking, everyone's talking around you, and suddenly everyone's silent, but you carry on talking. Well, she was saying to me, she said, David, I don't get the Old Testament. It seems to me like God blesses the Israelites, he saves them, chooses them, then they rebel against him, they screw up, he punishes them, and then he saves them again, and then they rebel against him, and then, and she kept going like that. And then she finished her sentence. She said, and this is where it was complete silence. She said, I just don't get it. She said, those damn Israelites. I went, oh no. And the whole coffee shop was silent, waiting for me to answer. So I gave her the answer, and I realized as I was doing so, that everyone around was hearing the gospel. Now, I didn't do that deliberately. It wasn't a setup. But sometimes those things happen.
I just think of one quick illustration. I was in a coffee shop, and I'd given a Christian book on the gospel to a man to read at his table.
Yeah.
And only a dozen, 20 people in the place. And he suddenly yells out at me 2 or 3 tables around, hey, what does substitutionary sacrifice mean, Jim?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everything went quiet. And
Yeah.
there was that glorious
Yeah.
opportunity. We had to do it with
Yeah, and you will get that. On the other hand, I was having a conversation with a friend from another Christian organization, and we were talking about how we reach people. And this man came over the table, and he said, I hate you people. You are the scum of the earth. So remember, by the way, when you're in a coffee shop having a conversation and you're sitting moaning about your minister or the church down the road, non-Christians are hearing that. And they're going, I don't want to be part of that lot. Just remember that. They hear everything. Yeah.
Do you believe that long term, like a husband and wife, which you can go out together to witness in different places, like the marketplace, hospitals, supermarkets, garden centres, National Trust houses, libraries, bookshops, that you can go out and gently witness to the individual and also then begin to take note of these people where they live. You mentioned about your own church. And if you can do that on a daily basis, long term, it can work.
Yeah, here's how I would describe that. We had an American missionary come to work with us, and he was all set to do EE, evangelism, explosion, and stuff. And I said, no. So what I want you to do, you're going to be here 3 years. So for your first year, at the end of your first year, I'm going to assess you in this way. I'm going to walk down Perth Road, which is the long road beside our church. I said, I'm going to go into every coffee shop on Perth Road with you. And if the staff don't say, hey, John, how are you doing? And start, I said, then you're fired. Kind of, And he looked at me and he said, what? And he said, you want me to drink coffee for Jesus? And I said, yes. He said, that's my dream job. And I said, no, this is what I mean. And it's interesting because there was a furniture restorer, no, it was a chimney place there where they did, fancy chimneys. And I went in to get something, and the guy said to me, what do you do? And I said, actually, I'm the minister up the road there. And he said, he says, I knew a guy from your church, American guy, John, great guy. He came in here, he did this, he went into every single shop, and he just got to know people and I think you do that, and I think you pray for people, and so on. I think your desire has to be to communicate the gospel to them, but there's a time to be silent, and there's a time to speak, and you've got to pray for the wisdom to know when to do that. I do think there's a certain dynamic that occurs when people pour out of your church, and I love this, when I actually do see them going to cafes and different things and just sitting there talking. And sometimes they talk about football, and sometimes they talk about the Lord, and sometimes... But what I don't like is when people go into witness mode. Where they're getting on with their normal life and they're suddenly, I haven't done my hours witnessing, so right now I'm going to witness. It's so artificial. It's out of the overflow of the heart the mouth speaks. And I do think it's important that we enthuse people in that way. So can I just go on, because I want to just give you, I'm not going to go into the same detail with each of these. Music. Atheists Ain't Got No Songs. Who's the American comedian? Steve, I can't remember his name. What? No, Steve Martin. Steve Martin. Google Steve Martin, Atheists Ain't Got No Songs. I don't have time to play it to you. It's just brilliant. It's so funny, but also true. We can use music. Now, why would non-Christians go to a Christian concert? I wouldn't, and I'm a Christian. They will go to hear really, really good music. Now, I use music in all different kinds of ways. I use music as illustration. I hear something, I will put it on. Leonard Cohen, for example, you cannot possibly understand Leonard Cohen unless you understand two things, sex and the Bible. Because 50% of his lyrics are about sex and 50% of his lyrics are about the Bible. And I use that all the time. There's a whole bunch of different stuff that you can use. But if you're going to have music in your church, and I think it's a good thing to have, and I'm not talking about worship bands, I'm talking about having a specific contact event, musical event. One, it has got to be good. It's got to be good quality music. And again, it's got to be well publicized and well organized. We had a jazz band from John Piper's church who played in a cafe down the road from us, and they were fantastic. And we had a guy out on the street, and he was just a natural evangelist, and he just brought people in. It was one of the best events I've ever done. The following night, we had them at the church. It was a disaster, because they decided to preach in between every song, and all of their songs were about martyrs. I was going to slip my wrist if I heard one more song about Christians being martyred. And people got up and walked out, because it was advertised as a jazz concert, and they came in, and it was like a service. Don't do that. Seriously, don't do that. We had a band called Sons of Korah come, and the Australians who do the Psalms, oh my goodness, they were just, musically, they were beyond brilliant. And the non-Christians who were there just totally loved it, because at a musical level, it was just A1. Or we had a bunch of Russian monks come and sang Russian Orthodox music, and then the second half they sang Russian folk songs. The guy, the basso profondo, had a bass voice that was so deep that the pews at the back were literally shaking. I've never heard anything like it. And there are people going, oh, I've had such a stressed day, David. That music was so spiritual. Well, we sing a cappella psalms as well, so I stood up at the end and said, this a cappella singing, it's really cool. We do it on Sunday, come along. Music's just a great thing to use in lots and lots and lots of different ways. I said from Mozart to Metallica because it's strange. I'll tell you this story because it's true, but you might not believe me. You have to believe me because I'm a minister and my kids tell me I can't lie. But I was doing a wedding, a guy from Sweden, and I went to Sweden to do it, and we're sitting there, and he placed us beside this big, huge Swedish guy with long red hair who said, "Hi, my name's Pilgrim." And I went, "Pilgrim? Okay, interesting name." He said, "I don't believe in electricity." Well, that's an interesting opening gambit of a... I said, "That's fine." He said, "I live in the woods in a cottage with no electricity, and we have water in the stream going by." And I said, "Oh, that's nice, Pilgrim." And I'm thinking, "Thanks, Henrik, for putting me beside Pilgrim." You know, and then he said, "I'm the lead singer in a death metal band." I said, "What?" I said, "Death metal." Like, no, it was not even death metal. It was a black metal band in a black metal band. And I said, "Not heavy metal, not death metal." He said, No, they're too quiet for us. I said, "Okay." And my first thought was, I said, "Pilgrim, what I don't understand is, if you're not into electricity, how do you play death metal, or black metal or whatever, or heavy metal?" And he just laughed. He said, "We make an exception for the guitar." And I said, "Well, do you make a living out of this?" He said, "Oh yeah, we're one of the biggest bands in the world." I said, "Seriously?" He said, "Yeah, we're called Crimson Tide." I said, what do you play to?" 10,000 people in Norway and Germany and North America, mostly Scandinavia. And I said, "Now, again, excuse me asking this, are you a Christian?" "Oh yeah," he said. "In fact, we're all Christians." I said, "But black metal, isn't that like satanic and all that?" He said, "Yeah," he says, "a lot of it is." But he says, "We're the Christians," and we just go. I'm saying, "Okay, this is my world is changing, So here I am sitting beside Pilgrim, who doesn't believe in electricity, who's the lead singer in a death metal band or a black metal band, and he sees it as a form of outreach and evangelism. I say, "Okay, don't judge." And he says, "What else do you want to tell me about yourself?" He said, "Well, I'm the only Reformed Episcopal priest trainee in Sweden." And I thought, at this point, all right, I'll just go with anything. Whatever I'm on, something's, there's something in the food or something, but it's just amazing. But, it's incredible how God uses music and can use people in different ways, and I think we need to think about that. Art, can atheists be artists? That was a lecture that I give a lot around art colleges, Christians in art and so on. Just one warning about art, Christians and art. Please, please, please don't pander to I'm an artist and the only people who understand me are other artists, so I need to have a Bible study with other artists because otherwise people just don't get me. Look, we're all artists. So when someone says that to me, I say, grow up. What you need to do is meet some more normal people and work around. But we need to encourage art in our congregations in different ways. And use art. We can really use art in all different ways. I don't see how you can go into an art gallery and not be able to proclaim the gospel. Even contemporary art, which I actually do like. Medicine. If you took Christians out of medicine in the UK, the whole NHS would completely collapse. We need to think about how we do medicine, what's involved. Some churches I know have started a nurses in community project where they get involved with local health, community, and so on. And there are medical ethics, things like issues like euthanasia. And if you're going to say you're against abortion, then you better act as though you're against abortion, which doesn't mean picketing an abortion clinic. It means supporting young single mums who've made the difficult decision to go ahead and have a baby, even when it's made their life really difficult. Well, you have to support them. We have to look at how we do all of that. History. I'm a historian, so I love history. Got to go with history. Every single community in Britain has a Christian history. And if you cannot use that, there's something wrong. I know people who do historical tours, even around the village, and different things. We've got to be able to use that. By the way, you can email me and I'll send you this PowerPoint so you have the things. Media. Get involved in media, write to the local press, see if you can get a column in a local newspaper, be a contact point for the secular media. No, all church leaders should be trained in how to be interviewed by journalists. And there's development of high-quality Christian media, including social media. If you're going to have a website, make sure it's always kept up to date. If you're going to be on Facebook, 95% of my congregation are wired in that sense. So Facebook is, for us, the easiest way to advertise events. But remember, it's a simple thing. All social media is public. So don't put stuff on there that you wouldn't shout out in the street. You know, you can use it. Now, to give you this, can you take one, pass the rest along? This is I'll tell you about this magazine in a moment. You'll see there up on the media, we use a Quantum of Solace podcast, and I started blogging, and I hate blogging, I hate Facebook, I hate Twitter, and I use them all. Because for me, I play in a chess club, for example, and half a dozen of the guys follow me on Facebook, and a third of my posts are about Christianity. Not all of them. And people, it's the kind of marketplace. But the blogging side of it, I'm amazed how many people actually read the stuff. Let me just say something about philosophy. We need to help people think about what we're doing. And the church, I think you all know the importance of the church. Our churches, by definition, have to be contemporary because we're in a contemporary society. We're not back, you know, in the days of Francis Drake. We're here, and we need to think about how the church is God's instrument for outreach and not for self-preservation. But I'll go back to the magazine, tell you something about that. I had a regular subscription to a newspaper. I got so fed up with the Scotsman and so on because it seemed to me to have more and more columns and so on, columnists, and I went to the editor and said, look, I'm going to cancel my subscription after 20 years. And I said, I'll tell you why. Because I want news in a newspaper. And you've just become a lifestyle magazine for the Edinburgh middle classes. And he smiled and said, yeah, that's true. 50% of our readership are that. Our advertisers want AB people. So I phoned up a journalist friend and I said, where do I go? He said, go to the Telegraph. I said, that's not my politics. It doesn't matter. This guy was a socialist. And he says, not my politics either. But he said, Telegraph, best for news. And then a year after I subscribed to the Telegraph, it changed its policy and it's become a lifestyle magazine as well. So most newspapers don't really do news. And they're filled with advertising and lifestyle and everything. The Times is appalling in that regard. So I gave up. And then I discovered, what am I doing? I'm looking at The Economist, The Spectator, Private Eye, Prospect Magazine. I'm reading magazines. And here's an interesting phenomenon, that quality magazines are increasing. Quality print magazines are increasing. Newspapers are decreasing. So then I thought, what about Christians? And to cut a long story short, last month we launched this magazine. We've decided to put a Christian news, arts, culture magazine that's not about the church, although the first edition paradoxically is, because it's about the church in Europe. That's what we wanted to do. We thought we'd make it European. We thought that it's not, although it's called Solace, that's because it's a cool name, it's not about Solace. We wanted it to be a coffee table print magazine that you could leave on your coffee table that people would pick up. The criteria was it had to be really well designed, really good artwork, real quality writing, from a Christian perspective about a wide range of issues. Next one's out in September. It's going to be on sex and sexuality, looking at things from prostitution in Athens to family life in Sweden to same-sex marriage in Ireland. Trying to have that, and our idea was it's a double window. It's a window for the church to look into the world, and it's a window for the world to look into the church. And our aim was to have, we've got the biggest network in the Christian church in Europe, and our aim is to have the best quality news, reliable, and from a Christian perspective. Because even someone like The Economist, their latest edition is that they're totally liberal in their values, supporting euthanasia and everything else. And I thought, I don't want sort of right-wing, fundamentalist Christian lunacy, and I don't want left-wing liberal nonsense. Why can't we just have apolitical, like non-political magazine, high quality, that you wouldn't be ashamed to give to your friends? For me, it's a kind of pre-evangelism thing, but it's also a means of communicating. So if you're interested, you get that copy for free. It tells you how to describe at the beginning. Subscribe. We've taken in, my board have been so good to me because they were skeptical, because it's a big thing for us. And I've also said we're not going advertising. Now, they back me off a little bit. We take 4 pages of advertising out of 48, but most Christian magazines are a third advertising because they're funded by advertising. And we said, no, if the Lord's people want this, they're going to have to subscribe. So we're looking for subscriptions. If you're in a church, you can get church packs. Go onto the website and you'll see it. I want to finish with one thing. I'll go back to this. And please do pray about that as well, because we're doing it every 3 months for a year. We've got funding enough for that, I think.
How many are you publishing?
We've published 4,000 for the first edition. We reckon that to make it a monthly thing, which is our ideal, we need between 4,000 and 5,000 subscribers, which over the whole of Europe shouldn't be a big deal. But it's one of those things that Christians go, it's a great idea, I wish you well. And then, you know. So it's up, it really is, it's up to you guys, because we're nobody really. And you have to look at it and say, is this quality enough? For me, I'd look at it and say, can I give this to people? And if you can, then support it. And if you can't, tell us what's wrong with it, or just don't say anything. I want to finish this by thanking you for allowing me to be here. As I say, I always ask, why am I coming to these things? And I just really, really, really have got, it's a cliche, but I really do have a genuine passion to see the gospel being communicated. And I think it's you that are going to do it. You know, it's not going to be big name speakers and stuff like that. I just think it's ordinary Christians who are going to do it. And I think the biggest thing is, when I went to Dundee and there were 7 people and 4 of them left, what do you do with that, the 3 or 4 that are there? You have to convince them that the gospel is worth telling to people and it actually works. And they do. And people start coming and people stop coming and you get all kinds of hassle and trouble, but it does work. So this is, there's a reality TV show, and this really is where I do finish, a reality TV show on BBC. And it showed a kid, some of you may have seen it, from Derby with a girl from somewhere else, I don't know, going to Atlanta. And it wasn't a parent swap, it was kind of like that. They were put in a family which was an African-American Baptist pastor couple. And this kid from Derby was homosexual, he was promiscuous, he was drug-taking, 17-year-old, everything, you know. Swears like a trooper. And he goes to stay with this African-American Baptist couple, teetotal, you know, Jesus turned water into Ribena, that type of thing. And it was a train wreck. You know, I thought, I shouldn't watch this. You know, it's like a car crash. I shouldn't watch this. And I was watching it. I was utterly fascinated. And I have to say, I had a lot of sympathy with the kid, because there were things that the African-American Baptist pastor couple did. I thought, oh, don't do that. Don't say that. Oh, don't, you know. But do you know this? They were fantastic people. They loved that kid. And there's stuff they did I wouldn't have gone along with, but I thought, my goodness, you have got absolute hearts of gold. And how people cannot see Christ in you is beyond me. And then it was the most extraordinary thing, because the BBC were filming. You know how they do it with the camera, the voice behind, and they said to the kid, he's in the car going back to the airport. And they said, have you enjoyed being here? I mean, he nearly got thrown out twice and things like that. And he said, I have loved it. I loved it. He said, these people are great. And then he said this, they're really into this guy Jesus, aren't they? And then he stopped and he looked and he said, see, when I go back to Derby, where will I find Jesus? And I was so moved. I was sobbing my eyes out, because I thought, if he walks into a church, will he find Jesus? You know, where will he find Jesus? And I couldn't stop. And so I was editor of the Free Church magazine at that time, so I phoned up my designer and said, look, I want this done in the form of the Yellow Pages. So we did an article on where can I find Jesus, and it's kind of been a driving thing for me ever since. And here's the thing. This is what my theology tells me, and this is what I think the Bible tells me. I actually don't think that there are millions of people wandering around going, where can I find Jesus? I don't think that kid was, until Jesus found him, because Jesus found him in that African-American couple through a reality TV show that was being made to make fun of him, really, and them. And that's where Jesus found him. So this is what my challenge to you and to your church and to say to people is, there are all these people out there who are lost. How is Jesus going to find them? Well, he's told us how he's going to. It's going to be through us. And that's all our responsibility. You know, that's what should burden us. That's what should cause us to get on our knees. That's what should cause us to cry out. I am not interested in Solas as an organization remotely. If it closes down tomorrow, it doesn't bother me. And even the church, actually. If my church turns away from this, I honestly don't want to be part of it. But I want to say, where will I just don't believe that God looks and says, I don't care about England. I don't care about the people. I think he does. And I think he's set us here to reflect that and to reflect his heart. So let me pray. Thank you, Lord, for this, and thank you for, though it's a Monday morning now, afternoon, for your goodness to us. And may it be that some of the things we've talked about, thought about, and discussed, that we would be able to put into practice, and that you would use us to help find the many people you yet have in this place. Lord, pour out your Spirit and bless us and encourage us and deliver us from cynicism or despair. Deliver us from the selfishness and ambitions of our own hearts, and instead enable us to seek your glory in all things. For we ask it in your name. Amen.